Now, I have to ask you something. I've seen the name for ages. I've heard the name for quite a while, a few seasons now. And every time I've seen it, it's Benjamin Sesko. Lately, people are talking about Sesko or Seshko or Sheshko. I have no idea what's going on. People are starting to annoy the shit out of me with this. Have you heard any? I will rely on someone who is, of the region, or when I hear the lad himself interviewed and he says his name. But until then, I'm going with Sesko unless you can contradict me. And it's interesting because that's where we go next. We go to the wider Premier League, and why not start with the mess that is Newcastle United? You and I have speculated as to why it is that they just can't get any deals over the line. What is it now? 8, 9 that have just gone completely by the board. And the Sesko deal looks like being the latest one of those and the most high-profile one probably to date. What is happening here? My take is that they probably need a more high-profile manager, because I'm assuming they're promising big money in wages. Is there anything looking likely? Is there at least an Ollie Watkins that they can go to? Because we know Watkins wants some kind of a move. Is Vissa any closer being done? Or any of the other names like Muniz or Strand Larson, or any of them a little bit closer? Because unless they get at least two of those lesser names, or Sesko plus one, I just don't see Isak happening.
It's just typical of their summer, how many rejections they've had across the board. And then last night they're buzzing, aren't they? Because they've been in talks all day with Red Bull and Sesko's representative. And Sesko's rep's doing a John Obi Mikel, isn't he? When he's agreeing a deal with anyone and getting ready to run away into the forests of Norway till he can get a deal signed and all that type of thing. It's just absolutely mental. And then United finally come in. I mean, this is how bad it is for Newcastle. They're getting blown out the water by a club that doesn't actually have the money fully right now, or hasn't lined up their books. United, if they get Sesko, are going to have to make sales to make it all meet, and they're still getting beat by them on a lower offer at the same time. I mean, it's just absolutely mental. Doing a bit of digging on this today, Sesko's, all the indications are from Bundesliga journalists, Sesko prefers Manchester United. And people will say, I know this is going to come in the chat as you do, why would you go to United? Like, look at when on all this, blah, blah, blah. United's wage offer, Trev, is more than 100 grand a week more to Sesko.
So that's why.
Sometimes things are as simple and as complicated as that at the same time. I mean, yes, there's legacy club and all that, and I get it. People will argue that, but yeah, it just is what it is realistically there. And like you said, we've seen reports that Ollie Watkins is the next break glass in case of emergency to do that. We've seen Ramos, haven't we, for PSG as another option to do there. Vissa, he's gone back to Brentford saying, I'm not going to train. I want this deal to get done. But that seems to just be frozen at the same time as well. I think this is proof of what happens on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of us, where we've done months of work. We've got experts in charge. We've done analysis, scouting, spoke to the players, lined it all up for the summer meticulously, as opposed to sacking the guy who's done that work, putting your nephew in charge, picking players that you like the look of, not actually checking if they want to come to you properly in the first place as well. The strategies couldn't just be more opposite. And I know we're going to be joined any minute by raging Newcastle fans, but if you are a Newcastle, you've got to admit there's an embarrassment there. You're set to be turned down by your seventh forward publicly. And normally we'd probably kind of, we'd have a laugh, we'd giggle like we've done with others at certain points. That's not trying to be disrespectful to Newcastle. We're just talking factually what's happened. The biggest annoyance is, going back to the first section, we are in a chain with these people, aren't we? Everyone knows who we want. Everyone knows what we want. And we've no way of getting around it until they sort their home scenario out. And I'm probably beyond words with this. I think I'm just back to a kind of type of scenario. That's honestly where I am with it.
Hey, listen. We've moved on from the Roy Hodgson reaction, which is good. It's all about evolution. Can I just make a mention at this stage as well? Lads flying into the chat rooms, lads and ladies, and fair play yesterday. I joined for 10 minutes when I could, and you were working with your lovely new toy with the lineups. I dropped into the chat room and some lunatic came into it, and the lads and lassies encircled said lunatic and sent him on his merry way. It was lovely to watch. We have a great community. God bless you all. And now watch as a lunatic jumps in. But anyway, that's the joy, isn't it, of an open-ended thing like this. Anyone can join. Let's move on to our next story. Having dealt with the mess that is Newcastle, and see if Spurs are any less messy. We know their talismanic forward son is heading off to the sunshine in Los Angeles, and Maddison, as mentioned earlier on, has a bad old knock. That's the Harvey Elliott link there, I think, for an awful lot of people looking at someone who could open a door or two with their passing and their movement. Yeah. But it's not just those two, that player alone. It's also a couple of others that they've potentially got interest in, including a lad for whom things didn't maybe go as well as he'd hoped when he made his big move to Bayern.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's starting to take a bit of shape under Thomas Frank. That had a mini bit of sadness for this for me, because Son's always been one of those Premier League players, hasn't he, that you've always probably admired from afar. Could have maybe been at Liverpool one day, but hey-ho, it wasn't to be. And it's the right time because his legs have gone. A nice move to the MLS with a bucket full of cash at the same time. Like you said, Maddison, a bad injury, so they're looking at attacking midfielders. Harvey Elliott does seem to be a serious option for them. But another one they're looking at who can play there is Moani. I think he's PSG officially, was on loan at Juventus. So he's one that they're having a good look at the same time. And if you think of Thomas Frank and teams at Brentford, he's always played quite physical midfield as well, hasn't he? Like Norgard, people who can really mix it a little bit behind. And I think they're quite happy they've got Palhinha. Do you remember the former Fulham boy who went on loan to Bayern Munich? They've taken him on loan for the season. I know all the noises from Spurs journalists. Thomas Frank is very happy with a signing like that at the same time. And to be fair, if you are going to get the best of Harvey Elliott, having someone like a Palhinha and a Bissouma or something like that, destroyers behind him in that type of formation, could just be perfectly suited in that regard. But they are trying to make a few moves now. Thomas Frank is trying to shape his squad a little bit, knowing full well they've got a Champions League campaign to deal with. And with Maddison looking pretty bad, and we're putting months on this, if not the season, they're going to start to make even more moves very shortly.
I've never known what to make of Spurs. I go back a long, long way to when Glenn Hoddle used to play for them, and I really admired Hoddle as a footballer. And they had Chris Waddle, and before that they had people like Steve Archibald. It was just a little bit before my time. But they were always a kind of an attractive club that was in the big five, as it was back then. But of late, it just seems to be a place where good managers go to die, and it's just a shame to see. I really hope, in a way, that Thomas Frank manages to do something, because he seems like such a good lad. You would be sort of eager to see a bit of success for him, of course, not at the expense in any way, shape or form of our club. So let's see if Harvey ends up there. Chelsea, of course, we got to go to Chelsea and Sweeney Todd's and bits and bobs going on. Of course, they have so many players that there's always a constant outflow from Chelsea, but it never ever seems to catch up, Dave, with the influx. Lots of big names in and around Chelsea at the moment, whether they're names that we'd want to necessarily be linked with, I'm not sure, with the exception, in fact, of any of these names, with the exception of Hato. I don't think we would. But do walk us through the business as it starts to ramp up a little bit for Chelsea.
Ambitious as ever, Chelsea, to have about 86,000 attacking midfielders and wingers on their books, aren't they? So what you said, we know Hato's come through the door there. And the two serious targets they're really looking at the moment, and many expect to get done, are Xavi Simons, who we know at Red Bull Leipzig, and Garnacho for Manchester United as well. Those are the two they are seriously wanting through the door. But Chelsea, for once, are seeming quite sensible and trying to balance the books. Dewsbury Hall, he's taken his stately home down to the Merseyside area, hasn't he? He's an Everton player, or set to be confirmed if it's not already. As is on the screen, Nicholas Jackson is likely to leave. They're looking at suitors, which isn't really a surprise because he gets sent off pretty much every game he plays at the moment as well. A couple of players to Burnley as well. Broya, Ugachukwu, they're set to complete permanent deals there. So that's even more cash going out the door there. I think it's Gui, it's pronounced, the young lad they signed from Barcelona. He's set to go on loan to Sunderland if that's not been completed already. So they are really, they've left it a bit later than everyone expected. And maybe it's just because of the Club World Cup and everything that happened. You can't forget, they got João Pedro through the door, didn't they, earlier in the summer as well. But Chelsea are still wanting to make a few moves, as we said. They've just got to ship the 8,000 unwanted supporting cast out the door and get that all sorted as well.
Yeah. Dewsbury Hall at the Hill Dickinson. Okay. Last story then is sort of looking around the rest of the clubs. It's all going to be a little bit of an anticlimax after the usual lunatic asylum update that is Chelsea. But City have been interesting. They went in early and did big business and got bits done very early. The most interesting one of all is the Tyler Dibbling stuff. I'm finding that very interesting because he's a lad that's so highly rated. I know several of our own podcasters, no one less than Dave Hendrick is mad about Dibbling as a potential player for the future. But there are also bits and pieces around Leeds and Villa as well. Talk us through the rest of the Premier League business as it currently stands.
Yeah, you're right. It's just a proper mishmash of stuff, this, isn't it? I mean, City, people forget they went huge in January. They went huge in the summer as well. A few of those didn't really work out. I mean, that young Vitor Rice who came from Brazil and Palmeiras, nothing's really, he doesn't look ready at all for the Premier League, does he? So what are they doing? They're using the multi-club model. So he's expected to be shipped off to Girona any day now to, play on loan there. And there's a few others, maybe O'Reilly's even been suggested if they get Livramento, who they're still going for. As you said, this one's just weird, isn't it? Tyler Dibbling could end up at Everton, of all clubs, under the Moisaya. And, they've had a bid rejected. They've come back. Southampton have made a counter offer, haven't they? Sort of around 50 million, that type of thing, which, I mean, do you remember at the start of the summer, it was a lunatic suggestion, but Southampton were looking for 100 million or whatever it was. I think it's probably fascinating as to maybe where his stock is. And, we're not trying to make enemies here, but the fact that Everton of all clubs are being linked with him as the strongest option maybe tells a little bit of a story of where he's fallen to. Other promoter clubs, we talked about Burnley making a few moves. Leeds are still trying to make moves, as we know as well. Looking to sign Bilal El-Khanousis, the young attacking midfielder at Leicester. They made a move for him. We'll see if that develops. And Villa just doing some weird moves because we talked about Ollie Watkins and might be happening. They've just about to sign a player, and I can't pretend I've heard of this player, but Evan Gessard, I think it's pronounced, from France, an attacker there. And do you remember Marcos Asensio, who they had on loan from PSG, trying to redo that deal as well, trying to get him back on loan because it doesn't seem like there's many permanent suitors for him, which I think would be a decent deal for Villa at the same time. So, like you said, to bring it all together, just an absolute mishmash of stuff, but loads of things going on.
If Everton were to get Dewsbury Hall and the kid who I've just mentioned, Dibbling, through the door, I don't think people should sleep on David Moyes getting them into some sort of respectability. I think it's very possible. He really did a super job at West Ham, and he's, you know, a highly regarded guy. He's easy for us to sneer at. Taft's Tavern, Man United spell. It's easy for us to sneer at David Moyes, but I would keep an eye on that. If he starts getting sort of solid citizens through the door, that's what he thrives with, is those sort of level of footballers and getting them to overachieve.